I'm your host, Teen Wolf, and today we are going to be doing. I'm sorry that I was 1 minute late. I needed to do something super quick. But today we are going to be doing a Dominaria Remastered set review once again, but this time it will be for the uncommons. And let's see. Let's get into those uncommons, and I'm pretty sure I got the camera angle right today. Maybe just adjust it just a little bit slightly. Like right there. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So right there, chat's working fine and everything, so let's get into the video. And please consider subscribing if you haven't already. It's completely free. And yeah, let's get into the set review for the uncommons for Dominaria Remastered. So first off, we got Assault slash Battery. So, Assault is a 1 red mana sorcery that deals 2 damage to any target. So it's like a shock, but a little bit worse. And then there's also Battery. You can either play one or the other. You can either play Assault for 1 red mana to deal 2 damage to any target at sorcery speed, or you could play Battery for 3 and a green, also at sorcery speed, to create a 3/3 green elephant. I think that's right. Yeah, elephant creature token. So, it can be useful in draft. I mean, you can get a little bit of an option, and overall, it's a pretty solid uncommon. I'd say, once again, not gonna really be used anywhere outside of draft, so yeah, it's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. And next up is Aven Fate Shaper, which for 6 and a blue, it is a 4/5 bird wizard with flying that when it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, then put them back in any order. Okay, nice little bit of card advantage. But here's the other thing. For 4 and a blue, you can do that again. So, you keep getting, like, kind of... It's a Scry 4. It's a continuous Scry 4. Except you can't put them on the bottom of your deck, which is the only thing that kind of sucks. You get to kind of, like, cheat a little bit. Like, kind of... stack. You stack the top of your deck. That's what it's called. So, pretty decent card. I mean, it's expensive to play, but I mean, in draft, it's a little bit expensive, but overall, I do think it is a solid card. And next up is Battle Screech, which for 2 and double white is a sorcery that creates 2 1/1 white bird creature tokens with flying, and you can flash it back from your graveyard by tapping 3 untapped white creatures you control. So, I mean, yeah, for 4 mana and tapping 3 untapped white creatures, you create 4 1/1 birds with flying, which, to be fair, isn't all that bad at sorcery speed. If it was an instant, it would be quite a bit better in my opinion, because like at the end of your opponent's turn, you could tap 3 of your untapped white creatures and flash it back and then get 2 more attackers for next turn. But, I mean, overall, it's a pretty solid card. I mean, it is an uncommon after all. It's not going to be super good, but I'd say that could be a pretty good draft card. But outside of draft, I don't think you would really want to play it in anything. And next up is Call of the Herd, which for 2 and a green is a sorcery that creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token, and you can flash it back for 3 and a green. So, 7 mana, create 2 3/3s. Not bad. Once again, kind of a draft card. I mean, this is a draft set after all, so there are going to be quite a few cards that are mainly just going to be played for draft. But there are some really good cards in this set that can be used outside of draft. For example, Chainer's Edict, one of the more powerful removal spells that you can play in Pauper, and a pretty solid card that you can play outside of just Pauper in formats like, I guess you could play it in like modern decks or even a couple commander decks, but probably not. But this card's really good because for 1 black at sorcery speed, any target player has to sacrifice a creature, which to me is really solid. I mean, almost everyone here watching this video, you've probably heard of Liliana of the Veil, right? Well, -2, target player sacrifices a creature, this is the same thing, but for 2 mana. Sure, it's at sorcery speed, but I mean, it's pretty good at uncommon, and it's been printed as commons before, so you could play it in Pauper, and that's a really solid card in Pauper, and you can pay 5 in double black, which is expensive, to flash it back if you absolutely have to later on in the game. But it's mainly just going to be used for the 2, player has to sack a creature, which is really solid for 2 mana at uncommon in this set, and is a great card for draft, and is a great card in formats like Pauper and maybe even certain modern decks. And next up is Circular Logic. For 2 and a blue, it is an instant that counters target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. So in like a blue-black self-mill deck or a... Actually, no, that's the only deck that can come to mind right now. But in a blue-black self-mill deck, that's a really solid counterspell. And hey, if you like end up discarding it in some way, you can pay its mana cost for 1 blue to exile it instead of putting it into your graveyard, and you get to play it. So it could be a potential 1 blue counterspell at instant speed, which is pretty solid in my opinion. So anyways, next up is Confiscate, a card... I don't think it's been reprinted in quite a while. I think the last set that it was printed in was Amonkhet, but it was a really good card, and I'm pretty sure it was played in a form of commander known as Brawl at the time. So for 4 and double blue, it's an enchantment aura that enchants a permanent, and then you control that permanent. So you could steal any one of your opponent's stains for 6 mana, which is a little bit expensive to do, but when you control any one of your opponent's permanents forever until that enchantment goes away, that's pretty solid in my opinion. I mean, it could probably be played in formats like Commander and maybe Draft, but outside of those 2 formats, I don't think this card would be great in any other kinds of formats, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's good in in other kinds of formats. And next up is a card I know for a fact my dad will play, and it is an incredibly annoying card. Congregate, which for 3 and a white is an instant that says, hey, you're going to gain 2 life for each creature on the battlefield. So you're saying that in like a format like Commander, I'm going to gain what? Like 30 life for 4 mana? Why does this card exist? And hey, you can play it in Pauper decks as well, because that was printed as a common once. You could play it, and I guarantee it would be good in a Pauper deck, in the right Pauper deck. And I'm pretty sure you could play it, and it could be a good card in maybe Modern, but I don't really think so. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. And then next up is a card that I think is incredibly solid. Yeah, Barrel House was just saying, sweet, that card's good. Yeah, it's a good card, especially in Draft. It's a very good card in Draft to gain you some life. So next up is a pretty good ramp spell in my opinion. Crop Rotation, 1 green mana instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you do have to sacrifice a land, which you would sack the land you used to play this thing, obviously. But then you get to search your library for any land in your deck and put it directly onto the battlefield, then shuffle your deck untapped unless that land says it enters the battlefield tapped. So on like turn 1, you play Forest, tap it, play this at the end of your opponent's turn or something, whenever you want to, sack that Forest, get out, a Triome or some kind of dual land or a fetch land or any kind of land. I mean, that's insane. And guess what? You can play it in Pauper. So yeah, great ramp in Pauper, great ramp in Commander, in a lot of Commander decks in my opinion, I think could run this card. And I guess it could be pretty good in formats like Modern as well, and it's definitely really good mana fixing in Draft. So overall, super duper solid card, and hey, it's a 1 green mana instant. pretty solid. And next up is Crosis's Catacombs. It's a layer land. It's a land layer, whatever that's called. But when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return a non-layer land you control to its owner's hand. And it taps for a blue, black, or red mana. So it's kind of like a bounce land, but it's a triome. A bounce triome. That's pretty solid in my opinion. I mean, you can't bounce on our layer, which, I mean, why would you want to? So, yeah, that's a pretty solid card. And I'm pretty sure there's another one. Yeah, there's another one up here. Daragaz's Caldera. It's the same thing, but it taps for black, red, and green. And there's also Dromar's Cavern, which is the same thing, but taps for white, blue, or black. And then I think there's two more. The other two ones, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'll talk about them when they're brought up. I'll bring up what colors they are. But yeah, that cycle land I think is really good. And I mean, that's insane in my opinion. That at uncommon you get a triome. Sure, you have to bounce one of your lands, but I mean, early on in the game, like, turn 1, you play a land. Turn 2, you tap that land, play a thing, and then play this thing. So, I think it's a really solid card overall. And next up is Damping Sphere, which for 2 mana is an artifact that says, if a land tapped for 2 or more mana, it produces colorless mana instead of any other types of and amount. Wait, what? Okay, so if you tap a land for 2 or more colors of mana at once, they produce colorless mana instead. And each spell a player casts costs 1 generic more to cast for each other spell that player has cast this turn. So, if, like in a Storm deck, this is a perfect answer to like a Storm deck in Legacy. I mean, all of your opponent's spells cost 1 more to cast for each spell they cast prior to that, so it makes it practically impossible to, you know, do the whole, like, I'm gonna storm off and kill you with Grape Shot in 1 turn thing. So, yeah, that's a really solid card, and hey, in Commander formats, that can also be a pretty good thing, but also, when they're tapping for multiple colors of mana, they add colorless mana to their mana pool instead. So, that's pretty solid in my opinion. That's a really good card at uncommon, and for only 2 mana, and it's not even a legendary artifact, which can be nice at times, I think. And then next up is a card that's not entirely good, but I think it could be decent. Dark Withering. For 4 and double black, it's an instant that destroys a non-black creature. Now you may think at first, okay, this is an instant, but it costs 6 mana to destroy a non-black creature. Why is this an uncommon? Well, you can pay its madness cost of 1 black if you discard it. So, there's the potential for 1 black mana at instant speed destroy a non-black creature, which is decent, but it's definitely not great. I wouldn't play it, and yeah, no, I wouldn't play it in any kind of draft deck. In fact, the only deck I would really play this in is a Madness deck, which, I mean, is in Modern and Commander, I guess, but yeah, outside of Madness decks, don't play that card. It's not... It's a trap card, is what it's called. But anyways, next up is Dedapult. Dedapult. Fun name. For 2 and a red, it is an enchantment that for 1 red, you can sack it and deal 2 damage to any target. So 4 mana, deal 2 damage to any target. Yeah, for 4 mana in red, I could play like 3 lightning bolts and deal way more damage. I mean, yeah, that's not a very good card. That's not a very good card at all. I would not play that. card at all. That's not a good card at all. And then next up is Deadwood Treefolk, which for 5 and a green is a 3/6 Treefolk with Vanishing 3. So when it enters the battlefield, it enters with 3 time counters on it, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you remove a time counter from it. And if there are no time counters left on this card, then you have to sacrifice it. So you get this card for 3 turns. And when it enters or leaves the battlefield, return another target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So if you have like a way to cheat this out into play, I guess it could be decent. But, I guess it can also be a decent finisher. I mean, a 3/6 body is decent. For 6 mana, it's not great. But I think the only format I could really see this in is like a finisher in Draft. But other than that, not great. But yeah, it's decent. And next up is Dodecapod. I don't know. For 4 mana, it's a 3/3 artifact golem that says if a spell or ability an opponent causes you to discard this card, put it onto the battlefield instead with 2 +1/+1 counters on it instead of putting it into your graveyard. So you're saying if your opponent has a card like Liliana of the Veil out, they plus it, make you discard something, you discard this, and you get a 3/5/5. That ain't bad. Outside of that very, very rare case scenario, the card sucks. I mean, I guess there are discard decks out there, like in Commander, Tegrid is a really popular commander that makes you discard like all the cards in your hand forever. So, I mean, I guess against that one deck, it could be decent. But other than that, not a very good card. Not a very good card at all. And here's another not very good card. Dragon's Blood. 3 mana artifact. And you can pay 3 and tap it. 6 mana to do something, it better be pretty good. Nope. You put 1 +1/+1 counter on 1 creature you control. For 6 mana. Sure, you can like keep doing that every turn, but I mean, that's not a good mana sink at all. That's not a good card. That's a pretty bad card. And next up is Dragon Whelp, which I think is a pretty decent card. For 2 and double red, it is a 2/3 dragon with flying that for 1 red mana, you can give it +1/+0 until the end of turn, which at first you may think, ooh, at uncommon, that can deal a lot of damage to your opponent in 1 turn. So yeah, that's a pretty awesome card. But if you activate that ability more than 4 times in a turn, at the end of your turn, you have to sacrifice this. Now, granted, if your opponent doesn't have any flyers on the board and you have enough red mana out, you can one-shot your opponent in a single turn, and it won't even matter that you have to sack this at the end of turn. So it can definitely be a really solid card, and I think it could be a very good finisher in a draft game when you're kind of running low on spells and you just need to find something to put your mana into, and I think that's a great mana sink. And you just keep pumping that, you attack your opponent, deal a ton of damage to them, and then, boom, their life total is way down. Now, granted, there are quite a few flyers in this format, or in this set, that you have to worry about for draft, but this is a cheaper one, and it has pretty good stats for the cost, so it's a pretty solid card overall. And I would probably play it in, like, certain dragon decks, maybe in Commander or Modern. Well, no, probably not Modern. But yeah, it's a pretty solid card. Probably would only play it, though, in a draft deck. And next up is Drolna's Crusade. For 1, a black and a red, it's an enchantment that gives all goblins +1/+1, and all your goblins are zombies in addition to their other creature types. Okay, 3 mana, pump your entire goblin squad, and they're zombies. Okay, yeah. Barrel House is like, yeah, I cannot wait to play all those flyers. I'm going to annoy every single one of my opponents, and I'm going to make them real, real mad. I mean, that's not what you said, but I basically, like, kind of, you said flyers sweet, can't wait to play this set, but I wanted to make it a little more dramatic. But anyways, Yeah, Dralna's Crusade, I mean, it's decent for 3 mana, maybe not great, but black and red goblins are pretty popular, so, and, yeah, cool. It's not great for 3 mana, but it is still pretty solid, so I'm not gonna say much about it. I'm gonna say that it's a good card. I'm not gonna really, I mean, it could be played in modern decks, it could be played. I'm pretty sure that's a card that you can play in Pauper, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, it's decent. And next up is Dread Return, which for 2 and double black is a sorcery that returns any creature card you want from your graveyard directly onto the battlefield. And you can flash it back by sacrificing 3 creatures. So you're saying I can sack 3 creatures and pay 4 mana and return any 2 creature cards that I want from my graveyard directly onto the battlefield. Is this good in like a mono black Shieldred or something like that recursion deck in Commander? Or I guess you could also play this in a lot of modern decks, maybe Legacy, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, you can definitely play it in all of those formats because that card is really, really, really good, in my opinion at least. And then next up is another card, in Legacy at least, that is incredibly busted, and it's on the thumbnail of this video actually, and in my opinion is one of the more busted reprints in the entire set, and it's only an uncommon. And that card is Elvish Spirit Guide. For 2 and a green, it's an elf spirit, that's a 2/2, and at first you may think, okay, it's a 3 mana 2/2 at uncommon. Sure, whatever. Is it like a good elf card? Nope. Because in Legacy, you want to get as much mana as you possibly can on turn 1 to kill your opponent on turn 1, 2, or maybe even 3, but very rarely will games go on that long, which is the main reason I don't play Legacy or Vintage. And the fact that their decks cost stupid amounts of money. But basically, you want to generate tons of mana for free. Well, with this card, you can exile it from your hand and add a green mana to your mana pool. Now, there's also a card that got reprinted in Times Power Remastered that's the same thing, Simian Spirit Guide, but for red. And Elvish Spirit Guide hasn't seen a reprinting, unlike Simian Spirit Guide, in an incredibly long time, and now the price has dropped quite a bit, but I mean, at Uncommon, it's still like a $5 card right now, which is insane. But yeah, the card's incredibly powerful, and I cannot wait to do some kind of busted stuff with that in like Modern, because that also is a really good card in Modern. And yeah, all of you Legacy players who watch this video, which I guarantee there's almost none, but that card is insane. Absolutely insane. But anyways, next up is Faceless Butcher, which for 2 and double black, it is a 2/3 Nightmare Horror, and when it enters the battlefield, exile another target creature you control. Oh great, we got another one of these cards. And when it leaves the battlefield, return that exiled card from your graveyard, or from exile directly onto the battlefield. Yay, it's a 4 mana 2/3 that makes us exile one of our things that then comes back when this card dies. Yeah, this card sucks. Don't play it. Don't play it in draft. Don't play it in anything. The card's horrible. Anyways, next up is a card that is not horrible. A card that is very, very, very good. Fact or Fiction. And for 3 and a blue, it is an instant that says reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, and your opponent separates those 5 cards into 2 different piles. You choose one of those piles, and it goes into your hand. And then the other pile goes into your graveyard. So, that's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. That's a really good card. That's a really good card. But, yeah, yeah. You want to play that card in your deck. In your modern decks, in your commander decks, in your whatever decks. That's a fun little bit of card advantage, because a lot of the time for 4 mana, you're going to draw 3 cards, or 2 cards. So, yeah, it's fantastic card selection. So, anyways, next up is Fire Blast, a really fun card in Pauper that I think I'll probably play, but who knows, maybe I won't. For 4 and double red, it's an instant that deals 4 damage to any target. However, you can sacrifice 2 mountains instead of playing this spell's mana cost. That's a pretty good uncommon white-blue flyer deck. Yeah, fact or fiction, I guess it, yeah, maybe not in a white-blue flyer deck. Just in any kind of, I mean, a white-blue deck, yeah, definitely play it, but, I mean, it doesn't just have to be in, like, white-blue flyers, but just in any kind of deck. I mean, fact or fiction is just a great source of card advantage. But Fire Blast, you can sack 2 mountains and deal 4 damage to any target, which is pretty stinking good in Pauper, and there's this little mono red deck out there that tries to play as many spells as you can in a single turn, make a creature super duper big, and kill your opponent in one turn with that one giant, like, 22-2 with trample or some crap like that, because Pauper is still busted, even though you all may not think it is. But anyways, next up is Fire/Ice, which, for 1 red, is an instant that deals 2 damage to divided as you choose them on any number of targets. So you can deal 1 damage to one target, 1 damage to another target, 2 damage to one target, doesn't matter. Or you could play Ice, which for 1 blue is an instant that taps a permanent, any permanent, and you get to draw a card. Whatever. I mean, it's a fun card, but yeah, it's fun. It's a good card. I've heard that it's a really good card, but I don't exactly see how it's a fantastic card, but it's a solid card. I would definitely play it in draft, and maybe like certain Spellslinger modern decks, but maybe not. But anyways, next up is Flametongue Kavu, which for 3 and a red is it is a 4/2 Kavu that when it enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to a target creature. That's a pretty solid card in draft, not gonna lie, and it's good in draft. Let's move on. Let's move on from that. Next up is Flesh Reaver. For 1 black, it is a 4/4 Phyrexian Horror that when it deals damage to an opponent, this card deals that much damage to you. That's not great, but I mean, in like a life gain deck, I guess it can be decent, but yeah, it's not great. I guess you could play it in draft. That'd be a fun card to play in draft and definitely make games quite a bit quicker. But yeah, it's not great. Hey, Taz. Master Taz is in the house. Next up is Floodgate, which for 3 and a blue, it is a wall, 05 wall with Defender that says it has, wait, what? When it has flying, sacrifice it, so there's going to be a way for it to gain flying. Whenever this leaves the battlefield, it deals damage to each opponent without flying equal to the number of islands you control rounded down. Okay? How are you supposed to give this thing flying? Whatever, don't play it. Let's move on from it. Next up is Gamekeeper, which for 3 and a green is a 2/2 elf that when it dies, you can exile it, and if you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Then put that card onto the battlefield, and all other cards revealed this way into your graveyard. Definitely a really good source of card advantage. And yeah, I mean, it's a 4-mana 2/2, sure, but you want to continuously attack with it, or if you're on the defense, block with it, and then you get tons of card advantage, which is really nice. Well, I guess not tons of card advantage, but card advantage. So anyways, next up is Gempalm Incinerator, which for 2 and a red is a 2/1 goblin with cycling for 1 red, so you discard to draw a card. And when it gets cycled, you can have it deal X damage to a target creature, where X is the number of goblins on the battlefield. That's a card. That is a really, really good removal spell. Yeah, that ain't a bad card at all. And next up is Gerard's Verdict, which for 1 white and 1 black, it is a sorcery that has a target player discard 2 cards. You gain 3 life. Oh, and then you gain 3 life for each land card discarded this way. So it's kind of making your opponent not want to discard their lands, and then if they do, you gain a little bit of life. So I mean, it can be a 2 mana, your opponent has to discard 2 lands and you gain 6 life kind of thing. So I mean, it can be decent. It can be a pretty decent card, especially in draft, and I guess certain discard decks, but yeah, definitely not a great card. And next up is Griffin Guide, which for 2 and a white is an enchantment aura that enchants a creature and gives it +2/+2 in flying. And when the enchanted creature dies, you create a 2/2 white Griffin creature token with flying. Pretty solid. 3 mana, give a creature +2/+2 in flying, and then when that creature dies, you get a 2/2 flyer. Not bad at all. Next up, I was talking last night about this little combo that you could do with like untapping like a crab infinitely, and then like I'm pretty sure there were cards out there that say whenever you untap a creature you get something. Well, here's a ton of mana to untap it. Well, here's a way to produce a ton of mana in blue, like the only kind of blue ramp in the world. And hey, it was a common once, but no, it's banned in Pauper because, I mean, this card is broken. Because for 1 blue mana, it's an instant that says, until the end of turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds an additional blue mana to their mana pool. So, what you're saying is, like, if I have 4 blue lands out, and I use 1 of them to play this, I have 6 mana. Nice. Really nice. But anyways, next up is Icy Manipulator, which for 4 mana is an artifact that for 1, you can tap it and tap an artifact, creature, or land. Not great, but I mean, it can be a pretty decent way to stall out the game and draft, but outside of that, maybe play it in a certain commander deck, but yeah, not great. And next up is Illusion / Reality. Reality / Reality. I was hard to read. I'm sorry. But, so for 1 blue, you can either play the instant Illusion, which targets spell or permanent. I'm sorry, I'm having to cock my head like this. Target spell or permanent becomes a color of your choice until the end of turn. Don't care about that. Or you could pay 2 and a green at instant speed to destroy an artifact. Don't care about that. Yeah, let's just ignore this. I mean, I guess it could be like a way to remove an artifact in draft, but outside of that, no. There are way better options. There are way more ways to remove artifacts. But anyways, next up is Improvised Armor, which for 3 and a white is an enchantment aura that enchants a creature and gives it +2/+5, which is pretty decent for 4 mana. But it does nothing else. But you can, if you don't want to play it, which I wouldn't doubt you, it's not great outside of draft, you can pay 3 mana to discard it and draw a card using its cycle ability. So, not bad at all. Not great, but not bad. Anyways, next up is Invigorating Boon, which for 1 and a green is an enchantment that says whenever a player cycles a card, you may put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature. Okay. Not bad. It's not great, but I mean, for 2 mana and a kind of cycle deck with all the cycle cards in this set, it definitely isn't bad. Anyways, next up is Life / Death, which is an incredibly good card in my opinion, and it's only an uncommon, which, because for 1 green mana, Life says, at sorcery speed, you can make all of your lands become 1/1 green, nope, 1/1 creatures until the end of turn. And they're still lands. So, yeah. The land that you just played this turn, use it, make all your lands into 1/1s, swing with them, you got a giant army, kill your opponent. For 1 green mana, at sorcery speed, and it's an uncommon. Man, I wish this card was legal in Pauper, but it isn't. Which makes me sad. Very, very, very sad. Anyways, next up is, and then there's Death. The other side of this card is Death, which for 1 black is a sorcery that returns any creature you want from your graveyard directly into play, but you lose life equal to its mana value. But for 2 mana, you get to bring something right back into play, but if it's an Emrakul, you have to lose 15 life. But hey, that doesn't matter. But yeah, overall, great card in Commander, great card in Draft, great card, sadly can't play it in Pauper, but a great card in Modern. It's a great card in any format, really, in my opinion, because I think it could be busted in any kind of deck, in any kind of format. So there you go. And next up is Lightning Rift, which for 1 red is an enchantment that says whenever a player cycles a card, you can pay a red, and if you do, this card deals 2 damage to any target. That is a pretty good card, in my opinion, because, I mean, like Invigorating Boon is a really good card, in my opinion. But Lightning Rift dealing more damage to your opponent, I mean, there are cards out there in cycle decks that say whenever you cycle, a card deals 1 damage to each opponent. With this card, you can do more damage and kill your opponent really, really quickly, because, I mean, in cycle decks, you have tons of cards that cycle, and usually most of them don't cost that much mana to cycle, like 1 or 2. It's just not bad at all. And next up is Mesa Enchantress, which for 1 and double white is a human druid, that's an 0/2, that says whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. Not bad at all, because, I mean, drawing cards is really fun. In an Enchantress deck or an enchantment deck, that is so much better. I mean, great card. Really, really good card overall, in my opinion. In draft, well, probably not in draft, but in certain modern decks and definitely commander decks for sure. And next up is Milliken. For 2 mana, it's a 0/1 artifact construct that you can tap to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, but you have to mill a card. But in a self-mill deck, hey, you get to mill yourself and add a little bit of mana. I'd say this is a pretty solid card that you can play in like certain commander decks, but other than that, maybe not the best card to play, but who knows. And here's a card that broke tons of formats and is the main reason we have creature lands today, because it was the original, Mishra's Factory. It's not a basic land. The non-basic land that could tap for a colorless mana, or you could pay 1 to turn into a 2/2 that's still a land until the end of turn. And you can tap it to give 1 assembly worker, which when you turn this into a creature, it becomes an assembly worker, +1/+1 until the end of turn. And if you have multiple of these in your draft deck, I mean, this can win the game by itself. So, yeah, I mean, for 1 mana and tapping 2 lands, you got a 3/3 every turn. And if you get more out, you get to do more damage. And then, yeah, you can see why this card's busted and why it's the most busted creature land. Because, I mean, it can do a lot of damage really, really, really quickly. But anyways, next up is Mystic Enforcer, which for 2, a green and a white, it is a 3/3 human nomad mystic with protection from black, which definitely isn't bad. And as long as you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, in other words, if you have Threshold, this card gets +3/+3 and has flying. So it has the potential to be a 4 mana 6/6 with flying. If you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, which I guess in draft isn't going to be all that hard to do in a green-white deck, because I assume like a green-white deck would be pretty aggro, and a lot of stuff would die, so who knows. Maybe it would be a pretty good card, But, I mean, in green and white, I mean, if you replaced white with black, this would be a way better card. But who knows? Maybe you can use it in, like, some kind of Abzan deck, a green, black, and white deck that's cares about graveyards and having stuff in it. So who knows? And next up is Nantuko Monastery, which is a land that you can tap for a colorless mana, or if you have Threshold, you can pay a green and white to turn this into a 4/4 insect monk with first strike until the end of turn, and it's still a land. That isn't bad. I mean, yeah, that definitely isn't bad at all. Once again, I'm not exactly sure why it's in the green and white colors, but it's a pretty solid card, I guess. I mean, like I said earlier, you could probably play it in like some kind of Commander Abzan deck or something, but who knows. Maybe there's a green-white self-mill or graveyard deck out there that I just don't know of. In Modern or Commander or whatever. And then next up is a really, really good ramp card in tons of different formats, but mainly Commander. And holy cow, this card's has been getting a lot of reprints lately. Because it is Nature's Lore. Once again, getting a reprint for like the 5th time in the last, year and a half? Yeah, this card's getting way too many reprints recently. But for 1 green, it's a sorcery that searches your library for any forest card, puts it directly onto the battlefield, and then you shuffle. Does this card need to get reprinted again? Probably not. Is this a really good card, though? Yes, because, I mean, it's not just restricted to a basic forest. You can get any forest. You could get, like, one of the original dual lands if you're playing Commander, because, I mean, if you're a Commander player, you probably have the original dual lands, because, God, they're so expensive. But anyways, that doesn't matter. But yeah, Nature's Lore, incredibly solid card. Really, really good ramp. Not just in Commander, in Modern, I guess. If you want to play like some kind of budget Modern deck and you're trying to find ramp. I mean, this definitely isn't the most cheap ramp spell. It still will cost you a couple bucks. And hey, it's an uncommon, which is a nice, expensive uncommon in the set. But yeah, it's a solid card. It's a good card, I guess. Anyways, next up is Necro Savant, which for 3 and triple black, sorry. It is a 5/5 zombie giant that you can pay 3 and double black to sacrifice a creature and return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield, but you can only activate this during your upkeep, which isn't great because you have to lose 5 of the mana that you can use on your turn, but I mean, it's a 6 mana 5/5, which definitely isn't bad. And you can pay 5 to sack any creature and return it back onto the battlefield. So, definitely a really good finisher in a black draft deck. And outside of draft, maybe not the best card, but it can still be a pretty solid card, I think, in other kinds of decks. Not exactly sure what deck, but I guarantee someone out there will find a way to make this card good in some kind of deck outside of the draft anyways. And next up is Night/Day. The Night side of it is a 1 black mana instant that gives a target creature -1/-1 until the end of turn, which is not that big of a deal. Or you could play the Day side of it, which for 2 and a white is an instant as well that gives a target that gives creatures target player controls +1/+1 until the end of turn. So, definitely not the best way to pump your entire squad. Jeldoran Warcry, I think, is quite a bit better, which, if you don't know what that is, I definitely wouldn't blame you. It's a really, unknown card that I've never heard of until yesterday, but it's such a good card. I mean, yeah, you'll see it one of these days. Let's just put it like that. But yeah, really good pump spell. Night/Day, not a great card. I mean, I guess it could be played in draft and be a really good way to finish out the game, like the white side of it. But other than that, I mean, I guess the night side could also be used pretty well in the early game, getting rid of one of your opponent's early plays. But yeah, I think it's a solid card in draft. Outside of draft, maybe not the best, but it's still a pretty solid card overall. And next up is Order/Chaos, which the order side of it, for 3 and a white, is an instant that exiles a target attacking creature. Not great. And the chaos side of it, for 2 and a red, is an instant that says creatures can't block this turn. Kind of like the day/night thing. That's a really good finisher, the chaos side of it anyways, because, I mean, it basically makes all your creatures unblockable in red. Yeah, I've never heard of this card before, but whew, that's a really good card. That's a really, really good card. I'm surprised I've never seen that card before. But yeah, I mean, in draft, great card. Outside of draft, I think it can also be a pretty solid card. In Commander, maybe. In Modern, probably. Maybe in Pauper if it's legal in Pauper. I mean, I'll have to check that one of these days, but whew, good card. Really good card. And then next up is Ovinomancer. That's really hard to say. I hate that this set has so many hard things to say. But anyways, Ovinomancer is a 2 and a white, or 2 and a blue, 0/1 human wizard. Great, it's going to be one of these annoying cards again. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return 3 basic lands you control to your hand. And then you can tap it and return this card to your hand and destroy a creature. It can't be regenerated, which I guess is nice, sort of, maybe. And that creature's controller makes a 0/1 green sheep. Why are sheeps green now? Who knows? I guess sheeps have been black and white and many, many other colors, but yeah, this card I wouldn't play, like, ever in any kind of deck. It is not a good card at all. But anyways, next up is Pain/Suffering. Pain is a 1 black mana sorcery that makes a target player discard a card, which, yeah, isn't bad. It's definitely a good early game spell against your opponent in a draft. And the Suffering side of it, for 3 and a red, is a sorcery that destroys any target land, which I've never been a big fan of land destruction, but that's a pretty fun card, I guess. I mean, that's a bully card. I'm just going to say that. I mean, it's a fun card for, like, the pain side of it, making your opponent having to discard a card and get a little bit more on the back foot early on in the game and in draft. But outside of that, I mean, I guess it could be played in formats outside of draft, like Commander, I guess, in the Tegrid Commander deck I was talking about earlier. But yeah, that's a bully card. That's a bully card. But next up is Phyrexian Scuda, which for 3 and a black, it is a 3/3 Phyrexian zombie with Kicker by paying 3 life. Which definitely isn't bad. And for 4 and 3 life, you get a 3/3 that enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. So a 4 mana plus pay 3 life, 5/5. Not horrible. Definitely a draft card. I mean, the 4 mana 3/3 isn't bad, but it's good. It's outside draft it's horrible, but in draft it's meh. It's meh. Next up is Quicksilver Dagger, which for 1, a blue and a red, is an enchantment aura that enchants a creature and gives that creature the ability to tap and deal 1 damage to a target player or planeswalker, and you get to draw a card. Pretty solid. Definitely not the best card ever. I mean, you got Quombage Witches, which is just a classic. I'm surprised that card didn't get reprinted in the set, though to be fair, it did get reprinted in Commander Legends, which wasn't all that long ago. But yeah, it's a fun card, I guess. It's definitely not the best way to pain your opponents, though. But you can also paint a Planeswalker, which definitely isn't bad. And next up is Rada, Heir to Keld, which for 1 red and 1 green, it is a 2/2 legendary elf warrior that taps for a green, and when it attacks, you add double red mana to your mana pool until the end of turn. Yeah, that's a pretty solid card. I'm pretty sure I saw that as a commander on, I'm pretty sure the Command Zone podcast a couple years back when Timespell Remastered came out. I'm pretty sure this was a rare in that set, and now that this is getting downgraded to an uncommon, is probably a good thing, because I remember that when I pulled it a couple times being a very, very inexpensive rare, so. But it's still a really fun card and can definitely be a really fun commander to play in like some kind of ramp deck. And next up is Recoil, which is a blue and a black for an instant that returns a permanent to its owner's hand, and then that player discards a card. Oh, here's another one of those layer cards, Rift's Grove. It's one of those layer cards that I was talking about way earlier in the stream. It enters the battlefield, and you have to sacrifice it unless you return a non-layer land you control to your hand. And it taps for a red, green, or white. And as I said earlier, really solid card. I think it's kind of like a bounce spell, but it's also a Triumph. So, yeah, really good card. And next up is Sawtooth Loon, which for 2, a white, and a blue, is a 2/2 bird with flying that says when it enters the battlefield, return a white or blue creature to its owner's hand. Pretty solid. And it's a flyer, and it's kind of funny. Barrel House earlier was talking about, ooh, Fact or Fiction would be good in a blue-white flyer deck. Which, I mean, it doesn't have to just be played in a flyer deck. But, yeah, it's kind of funny that later on in the chat, it's a blue, or in the stream, I see a blue and white bird with flying. But anyways, when it enters, you return a white or blue creature to its owner's hand. And then when this enters the battlefield, you also get to draw 2 cards, then put the top 2 cards, or put 2 cards from your hand on the bottom of your library. That's a solid card in my opinion. I mean, really good card advantage, and it also stalls out the game, and it's a 2/2 flyer. And all for 4 mana, I think that's an incredibly solid card. And then there's Sarah Angel, which we all know it. We all love it. It was the first angel, and it's still a good angel. Because for 3 and double white, it's a 4/4 angel with flying and vigilance. It's the classic. It's the OG angel of Magic the Gathering. And that card inspired me to build a deck for this set. And it's an angel deck, obviously, but my dad played an angel deck against me, and it crushed me. I want to play an angel deck now. I'm eventually going to do the same thing with Knights, because he crushed me with Knights, and now I want to crush him with Knights. But anyways, next up is, oh shoot, none of you should know about that yet. Crap. I said that on stream. That's not good. Just pretend I didn't say anything about that. I gave a spoil to one of the next gameplay videos that I'm doing for Throne of Eldraine, which I got earlier, as you all saw in the 7 draft tips video. But yeah, pretend you didn't hear anything. And next up is Slice and Dice, which is a sorcery for 4 and double red that deals 4 damage to each creature, which definitely isn't bad. And you can pay 2 and a red to discard it and draw a card, and then instead deal 1 damage to each creature. That, to me, is a pretty solid card. It's not a great card for sure, but it's definitely a fun card and a good card. And next up is Spectral Lynx, which for 1 white is a 2/1 cat spirit with protection from green. Yeah. And for 1 black, you can regenerate it. So what regenerate means is if this creature would die this turn, you return it to the battlefield, but it enters tapped. So really solid card overall, in my opinion. Because, yeah, that's what regenerate means. I just want to make sure, because I've been saying that the last couple days, and I don't want to be saying that wrong, because I've been playing regenerate wrong for a long time, and I'm pretty sure I got it right this time, but I just want to be sure. But anyways, next up is Spiritmonger, which for 3, a black, and a green, it is a 6/6 beast, so already looks really promising, and when it deals combat damage to a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Looks better than it already is. And for 1 black, you can regenerate it. And for 1 green, it becomes the color of your choice until your turn. That part doesn't matter. But black, you can regenerate it, which is awesome. And it's a 5 mana 6/6 that gets bigger every time it deals damage to a creature. I mean, my god. At Uncommon, that's a really good way to finish off a game in Draft. And maybe in a other formats. Like, maybe it could be a card that you play in Commander. Who knows? I guarantee you wouldn't play it or see it in any kind of Modern or Legacy or any other kind of deck. But who knows? Maybe it's out there in some Commander deck. But anyways, next up is Spite slash Malice. And the Spite side of it, for 3 and a blue, is an instant that counters a spell. Or counters a non-creature spell. Already sucks. And the Malice side, for 3 and a black, is an instant, as well, that destroys a non-black creature and it can't be regenerated. Decent for the removal side of it, but outside draft, definitely wouldn't play it at all. Not a very good card. And then next up is a card that, with another card, I'm pretty sure it's called Earthcraft, kind of, broke Commander in a way. Squirrel Nest is part of an infinite combo where basically you make infinite creatures and infinite mana for 5 mana. Yeah, the Squirrel Nest part of it is the less expensive part of the combo, and the Earthcraft, which costs like $180, part of the combo, got banned, and sadly is not in this set. But Squirrel Nest, for 1 and double green, is an enchantment aura that enchants a land you control, and you tap that enchanted land, well, you can tap that enchanted land and create a 1/1 green squirrel. Okay? But anyways, next up is Stand, and yeah, like I said, Squirrel Nest, really solid card overall. And next up is Stand, sorry. And for 1 white, it's an instant that prevents the next 2 damage that would be dealt to a creature this turn. Meh, not great, not bad. And then there's the Deliver side of it. For 2 and a blue, it's an instant that returns a permanent to its owner's hand. Not a very good card. Definitely not a very good card. And then Storm Entity is a very, very fun card, because for 1 red, it's an 1/1 elemental with haste that when it enters the battlefield, it enters the battlefield, and you put a +1/+1 counter, +1/+1 counter on it for each other spell you've cast this turn. So, yeah, in the Storm deck, you already know about that. That can be an incredibly fun finisher, because, I mean, for 2 mana, it can be like a 20/20 with haste. Fun. Very, very fun. Next up is another pretty classic card, like Spiritmonger that I was talking about earlier. That's an older card that I actually have 1 copy of, I'm pretty sure. And it used to be a rare, believe it or not. I mean, it's a pretty solid card in my opinion. And early on in the game, that's a really good card. But anyways, next up is Swords to Plowshares. The classic CEDH or EDH, whatever you want to call it, like, it's Commander. It's a classic Commander removal spell. Because for 1 white, you, at instant speed, can exile a creature, and its controller gains life equal to that creature's power. You may think that that sucks. For 1 white mana, that is so good. It's such a good removal spell. But anyways, next up is Tatiova Benthic Druid. The 3, a green and blue, 3/3 legendary Merfolk Druid that is one of the most broken commanders that I've ever seen before. At uncommon, I should specify. And it has landfall, so whenever a land enters under your control, something happens. And this card says, when a land enters under your control, you gain a life and draw a card. For 5 mana and a 3/3 body, really, really broken card. And like I already said, great in Commander, and I'm pretty sure it can be a pretty solid card in Modern as well. And then there's Terravor. Okay, I was saying that way wrong. Terravor. And for 1 and double green, it is a Star Lurgoyf with Trample. That's power and toughness. Are each equal to the number of land cards in all graveyards. So there also seems to be a pretty big self-mill plan in this set. And holy cow, this card can take advantage of that. I mean, with Concordant Crossroads, and if you have enough lands in your graveyard, this card can win you the game on the spot, which is insane, in my opinion. Alright, next up is Thieving Magpie. Gosh dang. Let's just talk about this later. Thieving Magpie. For 2 and double blue, it is a 1/3 bird with flying that when it deals damage to an opponent, you get to draw a card. That is a pretty solid card in my opinion. It's a little bit expensive in my opinion, but it's a pretty solid card overall. I probably wouldn't play it anywhere outside draft though, even if you want to play it in a draft deck, which I wouldn't entirely recommend doing. And then next up is Thran Golem, which for 5 mana, it's an artifact golem that has +2/+2, flying, first strike, and trample as long as it's enchanted. Whew, in a Voltron deck, this is an incredible finisher because it's got first strike and trample and flying and an additional 2 power and toughness, and it's already a 3/3 body if it's enchanted. Whew, that's a good card. In a modern deck, in a modern Voltron deck, or even a Commander Voltron deck, that can be a really good card to stuff all your enchantments onto. And next up is Tiana Ship's Caretaker, which for 3, a red and a white, it is a 3/3 legendary angel artificer with flying and first strike, and says whenever an aura or equipment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So it's basically a way to bring back your artifacts and, well, your auras, your enchantment auras, and your equipment, your artifact equipment. So, and it's a 3/3 flying first strike body for 5 mana, which definitely isn't that bad. So I'd say it's a pretty solid card. Probably not in draft, but in like certain modern decks, maybe a couple commander decks maybe, but yeah, it's a decent card for sure. But here's a card that, gosh, I hate that this card keeps getting reprinted at an uncommon in like every single one of these remastered or masters or all the sets that aren't standard sets. Tormod's Crypt. Everyone should know it at this point if they've bought any Time Spiral Remastered or any Double Masters or any of the remastered master sets that have come out in the past 7 years, because this card's getting reprinted in every single one of them. But anyways, it's a 0 mana artifact, and I guess in a Storm deck this could be a pretty decent Storm card. But you can tap and sack it to exile a player's graveyard. Don't get me wrong, it's a really, really good card, but I just hate that it keeps getting reprinted in so many sets. It's annoying. It's very much so annoying. And hey, here's the last layer land, the green, white, and blue one. Treva's Ruins. Like I already said, great cycle of lands. Really love the bounce triumphs is what I'm going to call them. Or just the layer lands, but I'm going to call them bounce triumphs, so it's a little easier to understand what they do. But anyways, next up is Turnabout, which for 2 and double blue, it is an instant that says you choose an artifact, creature, or land, and then tap all untapped permanents of the chosen type target player controls, or untap all of the chosen types target player controls. Oh my goodness, that's annoying. That can be really annoying. Kind of like that Chaos card, I think it was called, like Order/Chaos. That can be a really good finisher, because, I mean, it taps all your opponent's stuff, basically making all your creatures unblockable. So, yeah, that's fun. Or you could tap all their lands at the beginning of their turn. Like, you basically are like, alright, opponent, go to your turn, and I'm going to play Turnabout, and I tap all your lands. Or you can untap all your lands during your turn. Like, you could basically have double the mana on your turn. Definitely a good card in Commander. Really good. It's a really good card in general. I would definitely play it in some kind of like a blue-green ramp deck in Commander. And in Draft, I would definitely play this as a way to kind of finish off the game or make it really hard for your opponent to catch up with you if they're already on the back end or if you're trying to get them on the back end. And next up is Undead Gladiator, which for 1 and double black, it is a 3/1 zombie barbarian that for 1 and a black, you can discard a card and return it from your graveyard to your hand. However, you can only activate this ability during your upkeep, which isn't great, but it ain't bad. And if you don't really like this card, which, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of. You can pay 1 in a black to discard it and draw a card, because, like I said last night, 90% of the cards in this set either have Threshold or Cycle. So, I mean, just another Cycle card. It's, this is a joke. There aren't that many Cycle and Threshold cards in the set, but it seems like there's a lot. I mean, there are a lot, but you know what I mean. Next up is Valdulk, whatever it's called. Mr. V, Keeper of the Flame. 2 and a red for a 3/2 Legendary Human Shaman. Okay, decent. And says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, for each aura and equipment attached to this card, I'm not going to say that name again, create a 3/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste, and you have to exile all tokens that you make at the end of your turn. All of those tokens, all of those elemental tokens at the end of your turn. That's a pretty solid card overall. I think that could be a really solid commander. At uncommon, by the way. And I think that was printed as a rare once. I'm glad that they're kind of toning down the rarity of a lot of the cards in the set. Like the Bounce Triomes and a couple legendary cards and Spirit Monger. Because that's the first thing that came to mind. It's not like a legendary creature or something. But yeah, really fun card. I think it could be a really fun commander in certain decks. Alright, last 4 cards. Here we go. Voice of All. 2 and double white for a 2/2 angel flying that when it enters the battlefield, you choose a color. And hey, this card has protection from that chosen color. Okay, first off in draft, what the heck is this? Second off, in other formats other than in draft, man, I wish this card was legal in Pauper, that is an incredibly broken card. I mean, it's kind of like True Name Nemesis, but in white, but it's an uncommon, so it's way less good, but it's still really good. I know that didn't make tons of sense, but it's a really solid card, is what I'm trying to say, and I would definitely play it in formats just outside of draft. And next up is Wall of Junk. Yep, I've made a Wall of Junk. I mean, that's my magic wall right over there that I'm looking at right now. That's a wall of junk. Pretty sure it is. Not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that's all a wall of junk, right? A wall of magic cards is a wall of junk. I'm pretty sure that's right. Anyways, it's a 2 mana 0/7 wall with Defender, obviously, because I mean that's all walls. They have Defender and they have way too much toughness for their own good. And when this card blocks, you return it to its owner's hand at the end of combat. I mean, for 2 mana and it's a 0/7, that ain't a bad card at all. Return only. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Wall of Junk is really good, in my opinion. It's a good card, I guess. It can. Yeah, it's a good card. Anyways, next up is Wax/Wayne. Sorry. The Wax part of it, for 1 green mana, is an instant that says target creature gets +2/+2 until the end of turn, which isn't bad. And Wayne is a 1 white mana. The Wayne part of it is a 1 white mana instant that destroys a target enchantment. Definitely not a bad card at all. At instant speed, also pretty good. But yeah, I would definitely play it in draft and maybe even formats outside of draft, like Commander and whatnot. And Barrel House just said, so I'm bad at Magic. I'm not exactly sure why you're saying that you're bad at Magic, but don't entirely understand what you were just saying there. But no, you're not bad at Magic. You're just annoying and mean, and you make me very annoyed at times. Let's just go with that. And next up is Zombie Infestation, which for 1 and a black, it is an enchantment that says discard 2 cards and create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Good way to discard cards for free in a Madness deck. I would definitely say in Commander and whatnot. And outside of that, maybe play it in draft, but other than that, stay away from that thing. Not a very good card. But anyways, with all that aside, finally done with all the uncommons, all 80 of them. And tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 a.m. tomorrow, in about, let's see, right now it's 4:11, so in 6, 7, 8, plus 9, in 17 hours-ish, I'll be back on, just repeating what you said, way less, yeah. So in 17 hours-ish, I will be back on the stream covering the last bit of the cards in Dominaria United, the good stuff, the rares and the mythics at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And, like I said earlier, please consider subscribing if you enjoyed this, if you like the channel, if you like Magic the Gathering, or just, hey, if you're feeling nice, hit that subscribe button down below. It really helps out a ton. It's completely free. And with all of that aside, I will see you all once again to wrap up all the cards in Dominaria Remastered tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So, with all of that aside, hope you enjoyed the uncommons. Ton of fun to review them. And really good uncommons overall. And I will see you all tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So, see you there.